Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I want to speak directly to the hearts that have ever had to walk away, not because they stopped caring, but because they finally started caring about themselves. This is for anyone who's ever let go, not out of bitterness, but out of self-respect. There's something powerful, even magnetic, about a woman who chooses her worth over begging for love. In this talk, we're going to explore why men often fall harder for the women who let them go, and how reclaiming your power can shift the entire dynamic. So, let's dive into the truth behind real strength and attraction. You know what's really powerful? When someone expects you to chase after them and you don't. When they expect drama, tears, and endless texts, and instead they're met with silence, that choice to walk away without a grand exit, without trying to convince them of your worth, that's what sticks. Because the truth is, nothing hits harder than a woman who could have begged, but didn't. A woman who could have fought for a place in his life, but chose peace over chaos. That's the kind of moment that lingers in a man's mind long after she's gone. When you let go, not because you don't care, but because you finally realize you deserve more, it changes everything. It shifts the entire dynamic. You stop playing in the emotional tug-of-war. You stop feeding the illusion that love is about clinging to someone who's slipping away, and instead, you choose self-respect. That decision isn't weak. It's not giving up. It's the boldest move you can make. It's saying, I know what I bring to the table. I don't need to keep proving it to someone who keeps getting up from it. Letting go, especially when your heart is still involved, is not easy. It's one of the most painful things to do, but it's also one of the most magnetic things to witness. Because when a woman walks away from something she wanted to work, something she hoped would change, something she deeply invested in, it sends a message. Not to him, to herself. It says, I'm no longer making my healing someone else's responsibility. I'm no longer settling for a version of love that requires me to shrink just to keep it. And here's what's fascinating. That decision doesn't fade from his memory. Maybe not immediately, but eventually, when the noise dies down, when the distractions lose their thrill, when the attention fades, that's when it hits him. That the woman who once gave him her all didn't make a scene when she left. She didn't scream for closure. She didn't beg him to stay. She just stopped showing up with dignity, with grace, with quiet power. And suddenly, everything he thought he had control over feels out of reach. Because power doesn't always look like strength on the outside. Sometimes it's soft, sometimes it's still, sometimes it's the refusal to react. And that moment, that stillness, can haunt a man, not in a spiteful way, but in a way that makes him realize she loved me, but she loved herself more. That kind of love? That's rare, that's real, and that's unforgettable. So don't underestimate what you're doing when you choose to let go. That's not weakness. That's the kind of strength that echoes in the places he never expected to feel empty. There's something incredibly powerful that happens when you stop pouring your energy into someone who doesn't value it. The moment you pull back, when you stop trying to be understood, stop trying to convince someone to care, is the moment everything shifts. Not just for you, but for him. Because when you go quiet, when your attention is no longer guaranteed, it creates space. Space for him to feel the absence of your presence. Space for him to finally sit with the silence that used to be filled with your effort. That emotional detachment, it doesn't go unnoticed. People tend to believe that the more we chase, the more we show we care. But the truth is, desperation repels, and detachment, real, grounded, peaceful detachment creates curiosity. It forces the other person to ask questions they never asked before. Why isn't she calling me? Why hasn't she texted? Did she move on? Did she stop caring? And suddenly, he's not the one being chased anymore. He's chasing the closure, the attention, the validation that used to come so freely. Because what used to be expected is now gone. And we all know nothing is more attractive than scarcity in a world of abundance. You see, when a woman stops chasing, when she reclaims her energy and reinvests it in herself, it's not about playing a game. It's about clarity. It's about realizing that no amount of effort will make someone love you the right way if they weren't choosing to do it on their own. And when you stop pushing for connection, that absence becomes a mirror for him to see the space you filled, the love you gave, the stability you offered. And whether he admits it or not, that space starts to feel uncomfortable without you in it. Now, he might not come running back right away. He might not even know how to respond at first. But trust this, he will notice. Because your energy was a comfort, even if he didn't say it. Your consistency was grounding, even if he took it for granted. And your attention was his favorite drug. When that's gone, he'll crave it. Not because you left in anger, but because you left in peace. You stopped forcing something that should have flowed naturally. And that's when he begins to understand what he's lost. Detachment isn't giving up. It's choosing to stop begging for a seat at a table you built. It's walking away from someone who's still trying to decide if you're worth staying for. And in that space of letting go, you stop becoming a convenience and start becoming a mystery. A woman who values herself enough to release what's not choosing her. And that mystery, that absence, that's what makes men fall harder. Because curiosity grows where certainty once lived. There's something undeniable about a woman who sets a boundary and actually sticks to it. Not because she's trying to teach anyone a lesson, but because she genuinely knows what she deserves and refuses to settle for anything less. When a woman chooses to walk away from someone who isn't showing up, she's not just ending a relationship, she's setting a standard. She's drawing a line in the sand that says, I'm not available for halfway love. I'm not entertaining emotional breadcrumbs. If you want access to me, you have to come correct. And it's in that moment when she chooses to stop explaining her worth and starts acting like she knows it, that a man begins to see her differently, not just as someone he dated or someone he was involved with, but as someone he respects. Because whether he says it or not, deep down he understands that she's no longer someone he can keep on standby. She's no longer within reach unless he rises to the occasion. And for the first time, he realizes this isn't about her punishing him. This is about her protecting herself. So often we think being understanding, being patient, being loyal to someone who can't meet us where we are is a form of love. But real love doesn't require us to abandon ourselves. And when a woman stops accepting bare minimum behavior, she sends a powerful message. I'd rather be alone than in a relationship that makes me feel lonely. That standard, it changes the entire game. It forces a man to look at himself and ask, can I actually offer what she's asking for? Am I the kind of man who deserves a woman like that? And here's the beautiful part. She's not waiting around to see if he figures it out. She's not pressing pause on her life, hoping he wakes up one day and sees her differently. She's already moving forward. Not to spite him, but because she finally realized that love isn't supposed to be something you fight for endlessly. It's something you grow in together. And if someone can't meet you with that same level of commitment, walking away isn't the loss, it's the breakthrough. And that's exactly why men fall harder for the women who let them go, because she didn't just walk away, she walked away with standards. She didn't leave in bitterness, she left in clarity. She knew what she was offering, she knew what she was worthy of, and she wasn't going to keep auditioning for a role she should have already had. That kind of woman, she doesn't need to raise her voice. Her absence raises every question. Her silence forces a response, and her standards become the lesson. There's a truth that often gets ignored until it's too late. People don't fully value what they don't fear losing. When someone believes you'll always be there, no matter how they treat you, no matter how little effort they give, they become careless. Not always out of cruelty, but out of comfort, familiarity. They assume your love is permanent, that your presence is guaranteed. And that assumption, that's where respect begins to fade. Because when there's no risk, there's no urgency, no appreciation, no fire under their feet to grow, to commit, or to rise. But when a woman chooses to walk away, not out of revenge, but out of self-respect, everything changes. That fear, the one they never thought they'd feel, begins to creep in. Not because she caused it with drama or ultimatums, but because her absence feels different than anything else. It's not just space, it's silence with substance. It's a loss that carries weight. And that weight forces him to feel what he avoided when she was always available. Suddenly, what he thought would always be there isn't. That realization, that gut punch awareness, is when the respect is born or reborn. You see, men may not always show it, but deep down they admire strength. Not the kind that yells or demands, but the kind that walks away without needing validation. The kind that says, I loved you, but I'm not going to keep sacrificing my peace for your potential. That's the kind of strength that earns respect. Because it's not about her trying to prove anything, it's about her living in truth. She no longer needs to be chosen, she's already chosen herself. And that's when the game flips. That's when he starts to see the value of what he had, when she's no longer waiting for him to change, no longer sitting in the background hoping to be noticed. He starts to notice everything. The warmth in her voice, the way she supported him without asking for much in return, the way she stayed loyal even when things were uncertain. And now, all of that is gone. Not because she stopped loving, but because she started honoring herself more. When a woman lets go and walks away with dignity, it forces him to confront the one thing he avoided the entire time, his role in losing her. And if he's not ready to face that, he may pretend not to care. He may try to distract himself. But the truth is, that fear of losing her will sit in the back of his mind every time he meets someone new. Because none of them will be her. None of them will compare to the woman who had the courage to leave, not because she wanted to hurt him, but because she was finally ready to stop hurting herself. And it's in that kind of goodbye that real respect is born. There's something magnetic about a woman who knows her worth. You can see it in the way she walks into a room, calm, composed, unapologetically herself. She doesn't need to prove anything. She doesn't need to be louder, prettier, more agreeable to be loved. She already knows she is love. And that kind of energy, that quiet confidence, it draws people in without her even trying, especially the ones who once took her for granted. Self-worth isn't arrogance. It's not pretending to be above others. It's the deep, grounded understanding that your time, your love, your presence are valuable. It's the belief that you don't have to beg for a place in someone's life when you bring something meaningful to the table. And when a woman fully embodies that, everything about how she moves in relationships changes. She no longer clings. She no longer chases. She no longer tries to convince someone to choose her because she's already chosen herself. That's where the power lies. A woman who lives from a place of self-worth doesn't react to rejection the same way. She doesn't spiral. She doesn't internalize it as a reflection of her value. She sees it for what it is: someone else's inability to show up, not her failure to be enough. And when she walks away, she doesn't do it to punish him. She does it because she knows her love is a gift, and she won't keep offering it to someone who doesn't see it that way. Men feel that shift, maybe not immediately, but over time, it hits them because they're used to women bending, compromising, shrinking just to be chosen. But this one, she walked away in peace, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. And that's what stays with him. He may try to move on. He may even convince himself he's better off. But deep down, something about her energy will haunt him, not because she left, but because of how she left. Confident, collected, certain of her worth. And it's not about making him fall for her again. That's not even the goal. The beauty of self-worth is that it shifts the focus inward. Her life doesn't revolve around proving anything to anyone anymore. She starts glowing differently, not because she's trying to get noticed, but because she's finally poured all that love back into herself. And ironically, that's when the same people who overlooked her come knocking. But by then, her standards have evolved. Her peace is too expensive, her time too precious, her heart too full of clarity to be given recklessly again. That's why a woman rooted in self-worth is unforgettable. Not because she tries to be, but because she simply refuses to be anything less than what she knows she deserves. There's a strange thing about realization. It doesn't always come when someone is right in front of you. Sometimes it hits hardest in the silence, when all the calls stop, when the text notifications dry up, when the presence they once took for granted disappears from their daily life. That's when it begins. That's when it finally starts to sink in, not in the moment she walked away, but in the stillness that followed. Because at first, it's easy to believe she'll come back, that this is just another phase. But then days go by and the energy feels different. She's not chasing, she's not checking in, she's just gone. And that absence, it says everything. Men often don't process the depth of a woman's love while she's there, especially when she's consistent, especially when she's forgiving, especially when she loves deeply, even when he gives her reasons to pull away. It becomes routine to them, expected, almost invisible. But when she's finally had enough, when she stops showing up for someone who never fully showed up for her, that shift isn't loud, it's quiet. And that's exactly why it stings so much later. Because it wasn't a dramatic exit. It wasn't some grand announcement. It was a decision. A quiet, private moment where she chose herself over the version of love that was exhausting her. And that's what makes men fall harder, not while she's fighting for the relationship, but when she stops, when she no longer explains, when she no longer justifies her pain or makes excuses for his behavior, when she stops reaching out, stops overthinking, stops waiting for him to finally realize what she's been worth all along. Because now she's giving that energy back to herself. And when that happens, the things he never noticed before become impossible to ignore. The way she always encouraged him, the way she gave without asking for much, the way her presence brought calm, stability, even joy. Things he now feels the absence of in every part of his life. He may try to replace her, he may look for distractions, but what he won't find again is her essence. That rare combination of strength and softness, of loyalty and independence, of love and self-respect. Because the truth is, when a woman finally lets go, it's not a performance, it's not a tactic, it's real. And that's why it's so powerful. Because when she finally reaches that point, there's no looking back, no second chances, no reopening the door she had to close just to save herself. And in that moment, he begins to understand the real cost of his choices. Not just the relationship he lost, but the version of her he'll never have access to again. And that's when it truly hits him, not in the goodbye, but in the silence that follows it.